This is my current daily driver laptop, an HP Omen 360 13-inch thin and light from 2021. And this is my Lenovo IdeaPad V130, a 15-inch budget laptop from about 5 years ago, which I used until I bought the Omen. Now, given only these two data points, you'd be forgiven for thinking that back in 2005, laptops would have been huge. And to an extent that's true. I remember Samsung bringing a 19-inch laptop to market back in 2005. But the machine that I rocked back then was a darn sight smaller. And it's here, under this tea towel. This is the Sony PCG-U101, a Japan-only release from 2003. The PCG-U line were a short-lived run, starting with the PCG-U1 back in 2002, followed by the U3 later that year, and finally this PCG-U101 a year later in 2003. I found my original PCG-U101 on eBay after googling ultra-portable laptops and finding one of them newfangled weblogs belonging to one Matthew Miller, where he shared his views on his Sony PCG-U101. I had to have one, and sure enough there was one available on eBay, and around £500 later it was mine. I kept my original for around 18 months until I could A. afford something a little better, and B. no longer needed ultra portability due to a role at work with less travel involved. Now clearly I had bought it just for its physical attributes. Even by 2006 the specs on this thing were already starting to age quite poorly. It only has a 600MHz Celeron processor as standard, along with 256MB of DDR memory and a 30GB hard disk. But back before social media was really a thing, and all you needed was MSN Messenger, that was more than enough to keep me connected while away from home. I've had a saved search on eBay running for one of these for a while now, and when this one popped up new in box, I just had to have it. The seller proclaimed that they'd bought this on a business trip to Japan and never used it, but as we'll see later, that's not entirely true. That said, it does look to be in more or less complete condition in the box. We've got the original power supply, including the Japanese Type A power lead. Then we've got some English versions of the recovery media, along with the original Japanese recovery disks for Windows XP. We've then got the Windows license agreement, the manual, and a few other flyers and stuff, none of which I can read because it's all in Japanese. And lastly, nuzzled under these cardboard folds, is the device itself. This machine is absolutely diminutive in size. This might not be that impressive in 2022, but 19 years earlier when this thing was created, this sort of black magic would have been mind-boggling to say the least. The actual dimensions are just 178 by 139 by 34mm, which is tiny no matter which way you look at it. You can't really get a good perspective on this thing without having some sort of frame of reference. So here it is next to a standard 330ml cola can. Yeah, if this breaks your brain a little bit, don't worry. It did the same to me the first time I saw it. When you consider also that the width of this thing is round about the width of my smartphone, it really demonstrates its diminutive size. This example looks to be in fantastic condition, probably even better than my original, which had a fair few scuffs consistent with being carried around in the side pocket of whatever oversized jeans I was wearing in the early 2000s. To the front you've got 3.5mm jacks for headphones and microphone, along with Sony's proprietary Magic Gate memory card slot. This was Sony's ill-gotten attempt at breaking the portable media market, around about the same time that SD cards were becoming quite popular. We all know how well that turned out, but for a while in the early 2000s, you just couldn't buy a device from Sony unless it had this card reader included. Next to both of those, you've got the fan intake, perfectly positioned to get covered up by your t-shirt. Moving around to the left, you've got a single PCM-CIA slot, and then underneath this little cover, you've got a USB 2.0 port, as well as a mini FireWire port along with this DC connector. I seem to remember this was for a matching CD-ROM drive that you could optionally buy. And then lastly, there's this display connector, which I initially thought was a mini display port, but on closer inspection, I'm not sure what it is, probably some proprietary rubbish knowing Sony. Round to the back, you've got the fan exhaust, another USB 2.0 port, the battery release clip, and an eyelet for connecting to a wrist strap, which I can honestly say I've never seen anywhere on a laptop before. Lastly, on the right hand side, you've got the port for the 16-volt power supply, along with the wired network port under this cover. In the screen section, you've got something else you don't see every day, at least in 2022, a physical on-off switch for the built-in Wi-Fi. If we flip the machine over and remove the battery, you can see the Windows license key sticker along with two removable panels. These are for the RAM and the hard disk, which is a 1.8-inch spinning disk from Toshiba, the same type that were also used in Apple's original iPod line from the same era. Though I appreciate the feat of engineering to get a full-size hard disk to be that small, it's not a high-performance drive by any means, and we can fully expect it to hold back this laptop in terms of load times. The memory module is the often forgotten micro DIMM type. These never really took off as they weren't that much smaller than traditional SODIMM, and they're actually really expensive if you try and find one now. This battery slab looks like it's the standard model, which I remember was good for a couple of hours of general use. Sony did release an expanded battery though, which they claimed was good for up to 10 hours, and I remember it being long enough to see me through a European flight watching DivX files with no issues at all. Looking at the device with the lid open, you've got quite possibly the smallest physical keyboard on any laptop ever. I don't have particularly big hands, but even for me this is quite a stretch. I do remember the main reason I got rid of my machine originally was that it was incredibly difficult to build up any sort of speed while typing, and doing so for more than a few minutes really did make your bones ache. It is not a comfortable experience. I mean, just look at the size of that space bar. My thumb covers half of it. I guess when you factor in that Japanese people in general will have smaller hands, and that the device is supposed to be used almost like a handheld, it sort of makes sense. But ultimately, this was what led me to get rid of my original one a couple of years after I got it. It's compounded by all of the keys being multifunction, which you'd need for a Japanese layout, but thankfully in Windows you can just set the keyboard language to UK English and it works just fine. Above the keyboard you've got a speaker grill here, along with the power, standby and power save buttons, and then these two discs represent your pointing device on this machine. The left hand one here is simple enough. It has three buttons which represent your mouse clicks, and it also houses the indicator lights for caps, number and scroll lock. Moving over to the right hand one here, you've got your keyboard cursor keys, along with a trackpad style nub for moving the mouse cursor. I'm not quite sure what these notations for thumb phrase and zoom rotation mean. I'm pretty sure I never got them working on my original one, but with the benefit of Google Translate, it seems like there's something to do with accessing the variety of Japanese characters etched on the keyboard. Above all of that, you've got this glorious display. It's a 7-inch 4:3 aspect ratio display at a whopping resolution of 1024x768. That was insanely impressive for a machine of this time, and the dot pitch would have probably rivaled many of today's 4K displays. In fact, I've done the maths, and the pixel density on this display is around 250 pixels per inch. To put that in perspective, The pixel density on my 32-inch 4K monitor is only 138 pixels per inch, meaning this thing has a much higher definition relative to its size when compared to my modern 4K monitor. That's bonkers. I recall reading several articles which stated that the readability of the screen at its native resolution was quite difficult, but to be honest, I never personally had a problem with it. I guess it just depends on the person. Right, nothing to do now but turn it on. Okay, that's not surprising. The CMOS battery will be well overdue for replacement. But we can see here the RAM has been upgraded at some point to 512 MB, which will be a big help given how poorly a fully patched Windows XP install will run on 256. That hard disk doesn't sound healthy. Those clicks are definitely not a good thing. I think I might be searching for a replacement in due course. Windows XP seems to boot up just fine though, and here's why I doubt the seller's story that he'd bought this and then put it in a cupboard. It's clearly been set up and used to some degree, given that it has a user setup and all these third-party apps installed. That said, I'm not going to dwell on it, it's still in fantastic condition. I can't really explain to you just how good this screen looks. It's truly remarkable even today, and what's more, it's backed with some grunt. This thing packs an ATI Mobility Radeon with 16 MB of dedicated VRAM. Back in 2003, and in a package this small, that was phenomenal. Unfortunately, it couldn't really do much with all that power without bolting on an external CD-ROM drive. So let's throw this Sony PCMCIA CD drive in and take this thing for a spin. Right after I stop laughing about how silly this looks with a full-size CD-ROM drive next to it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why I fell in love with this thing. It was useful for staying in touch with friends and family while travelling, but to be able to play slightly older games this well, while on the go, was a fantastic experience at the time. What's more, in a time where having a Netflix account still meant receiving DVDs in the post, this machine was awesome for saving a few episodes of your favourite TV show and watching them on the move. I hope you've enjoyed this video on this Sony Vaio PCG-U101. I've certainly enjoyed taking another look at this machine, and I'm going to be glad to add it to my collection. If you have any thoughts or memories on the Sony U line of computers, or any other line of ultra-portable machine, I'd love to read about them, so drop me a comment below and I'll be sure to get back to you. If you could also like this video, I'd sincerely appreciate it. And if you do like this kind of content, you can also subscribe to my channel and see more from me. And you can get in touch via my social handles on the screen now. With that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.